The last question we have here is, what is your encouragement for someone who wants to be a biblical counselor? Oh, that's wonderful. One of God's most glorious promises in his scriptures is when Jesus says, I will build my church. And wise biblical counselors are part of God's fulfillment of that promise, that he will indeed build his church, right? Being a biblical counselor is doing ministry for the building up of Christ's kingdom and the church. Now, when we think about how one might discern whether one might be called into biblical counseling ministry, we want to think of that as a call towards ministry, not necessarily pastoral ministry, right? But a call towards ministry, which means that as Christians have always talked about calls towards ministry, we want to look at two different factors. The first is the internal call, right? Does someone have the desire to move towards ministry in a particular capacity? And this is really important because, to be honest, ministry is hard. It consumes your heart, right? So as a biblical counselor, I consistently get to see kind of the underside of humanity, right? I'm in an occupation where I will get a phone call that will just bring you to your knees over the sickness and pervertedness of what humans do to each other. And if you aren't called towards it, if there's not a desire, it'll eat you alive. And God has given certain people that desire and that call. It's not a more noble call than the call towards something else, but it is a fulfillment of Christ's promise to build his church. So if you desire that, wonderful. I'm so excited for that. I'm really thankful that God is fulfilling his promise. The second, though, is the external call, right? The external call speaks of whether those who are in the church around you believe that you're a good candidate for ministry. Internal desires are not bulletproof, right? So I had certain sports aspirations growing up before I realized that I was going to be a 5'7", relatively unathletic human being, and that my dreams of sporthood simply wasn't in the cards given who God had built me to be, right? Same thing with ministry. There are individuals who desire to do ministry, and yet at the same time just may not be cut out for that. And that's actually God's kindness to you, for you to seek out people in your church, specifically leaders, to see if they think that you would be at this time a good candidate for that kind of thing. They may tell you a couple different things. They may hardly endorse that. That would be wonderful. They secondarily may say, you know what, we see the gifting there. We see that you are a individual that deeply loves people, that deeply loves the Lord, but we think that there's just a handful of maybe moral qualities or wisdom that we think you can mature in. So let's take you under our wing and disciple you up in those things, and then we can talk about ministry. If that's the case, it may wound your pride. But you know what? That's a good thing, because the foundation of being a good counselor is being humble, being sensitive to the Spirit. And if the Lord uses that in your life, then wonderful. And then other times individuals in your church may say, you know what? That's great that you have the desire. But I think that maybe just the way God has built you as a person, perhaps there's not that relational sensitivity that makes someone a good counselor. Or perhaps there's just maybe a challenge of seeing the forest and not simply focusing on particular trees that's necessary as you're helping someone work through tendencies. That doesn't mean that you're not called to ministry at all. Rather, it may mean that the Lord is using this to refine and redefine what lanes you may want to go in. I did not intend to become a biblical counselor when I started seminary. In fact, I actually one time said I will never get a doctorate. And yet here I am many years later doing the very thing that I had prophesied that I would not do, because the Lord's call is in my life and directing me that way, right? But as we take steps in faithfulness, the Lord directs our paths as we're going. And I will just say, if everything's a green light, the next great step would be to look at pursuing education in biblical counseling, right? There's a reason that there are graduate programs in biblical counseling, because there's a lot of Bible, theology, and specific counseling training that are incredibly helpful as we seek to become wise biblical counselors. I myself am pretty partial to the program at Reformed Theological Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm a professor at. Give us a call. We would love to talk with you about it. I will say there's many, many great biblical counseling programs out there as well. We're certainly not the only one. So if that's something that you see the Lord opening up some means and opportunities for, and the testimony of your church, the Lord bless you, and I'm excited to consider you a partner in the gospel of Jesus Christ.